This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the science podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Gagne.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. Well, if you have been listening long enough, you know that the ocean is Jennifer's favorite place. But no matter where you live, everybody loves the ocean.
Yes, I absolutely love the ocean. So what episodes are we learning from today?
The best of the amazing ocean.
Ooh, the best of the amazing ocean. Yeah, this is going to be so much fun. So in this best of clip, you will hear from episode 194, Eric Winnick Anthony and the JOIDES resolution at sea for Why Do Science at Sea. This was a really cool one.
It sure was. She was on the boat at the time.
Yes, and of course, our favorite guest, Dr. Brian Helmuth, episode 200, How Much Is There Still to Learn About the Ocean? Hint, a lot. And finally, episode 198, Dr. Joe DeTore, How Long Can Humans Live Underwater? Which is really important. So these are going to be so much fun. Take a listen.
Why do science at sea?
Ooh, why do science at sea? Oh, I think I know where you're going with this, Jeff. Who is our guest today?
Our guest today is the fantastic science communicator, Erin Winnick Anthony. She is currently serving as the onboard outreach officer aboard the JOIDES resolution ship.
Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thank you so much. Excited to be back and talking about something completely different this time.
Exactly. So why don't we just jump right in? Can you tell our listeners exactly what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I'm currently talking to you from the middle of the ocean, which is kind of crazy. So I am on a ship called the JOIDES Resolution. That's a scientific ship. I have been on it now for 6 weeks, and we are doing geology research. We're going to be out here for 2 whole months straight. Yes, that means we're not going back during any of that time to shore. And it's all for science. We're taking cores of rock of the ocean floor, going down over a mile underneath the seafloor, getting rock from millions of years ago to solve some very specific problems that I'm sure we will get into more. But yeah, at its core, we are taking a bunch of rock from underneath the earth.
Wow.
Wow. Okay, can you explain how, from a boat floating, you are getting cores from the bottom of the ocean?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a large drill on board, a coring drill that sends down a pipe basically from our floating platform down to directly under wherever we are. So sometimes that's going down 500 meters, sometimes it's going down thousands of meters down through all of that water.
Wow.
And at the end of this pipe is something that's able to carve out rock from down, deep, deep, deep. And kind of like, honestly, like an elevator shaft, we are able to pull up those cores of rock through that tube over and over again to be able to get down as far as we want to get some of those Earth secrets that we're looking at.
Wow. So when you do that, are you using some sort of like vacuum to pull up the actual core? Because I'm kind of wondering, how does that actually work, right?
Yeah, kind of crazy, but it is like a pulley system, like literally like an elevator that sends these tubes up and down. So we have one tube on the outside that stays down the whole time, and then interior ones there's one that's able to go down and up at a time. So they can't pass each other, but it goes down, and then we're able to pull it all the way right back up.
Okay, that makes sense.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so in these cores, is it dirt? Is it packed dirt? Is it solid rock?
Good question. So the Joides has done a bunch of expeditions, and the answer would be different for everyone. But for ours, first of all, we're getting a lot of mud, which is gray mud.
Okay.
I know might not sound exciting, but our scientists on board are very excited about gray mud because it has a lot of other things in it, like tiny fossils and the very specific type of formations that allow us to learn about how the ocean flowed and currents from a long time ago. We've gotten some sandstone, so we have hit some harder rock and things like that as well. And then within that, there's tiny amounts of other different types of minerals and things like that. But the tubes largely look very gray, variations on gray with some like a little bit leaning more green and things like that. And our sedimentologists, I'm sure, would be able to tell you the 15 different shades of gray that we have seen and what they all mean. But yeah, largely to all of us would look like mud and harder mud.
Yes.
All right.
So now tell us kind of where you guys are going, because I know you started at one place kind of in the North Atlantic, and now you're kind of going around. Are you heading into the Mediterranean? Is that where you're headed?
Yeah, so we started in Amsterdam. That was our starting point. And then we had like a 5-day transit. So 5 days of sailing to get to our first site. And we've been largely off the coast of Portugal and Spain so far. And then in a few days, we're all very excited because we're going to be going through the Strait of Gibraltar. And this is a very narrow point between Europe and Africa. And so we're hoping that it's during daytime and we can see both continents at the same time.
Oh, that would be cool.
We'll be going in. So yeah, the end of our expedition, the last like couple weeks, will all be in the Mediterranean.
Okay. That sounds really cool, by the way. I'm really hoping it's daytime for you as well. Seeing 2 continents, that sounds awesome. I was reading up a little bit about your mission, and these cores are being taken to study the interchange of water, the ocean water, between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. Why is it important to study that?
Yeah, so right now we are looking back millions of years into the exchange of water between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, because we're looking at a time when they actually got cut off from each other. So the Mediterranean got completely cut off from the Atlantic due to movement of the tectonic plates.
Oh, wow.
When this happened, the Mediterranean largely dried up and left behind a bunch of salt. So, you know, if you've ever been in the ocean, you've tasted that salt in that salt water. Well, when the water goes away, the salt stays behind. And we had about a 1,500 meter layer of salt that was like just left there at the bottom. And this had huge impacts on the Earth's oceans, circulations, chemistry, and even potentially contributed to a period of global cooling. So this had a major impact. And by studying what this extreme period, we can learn more about how our Earth's oceans respond to really extreme periods and changes. So it can help us refine like our climate models and understand how our Earth responds to these sort of things. So we're largely looking back at this really extreme time of this exchange between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic.
Wow, 1,500 meters. Had no idea you'd find a salt layer that thick.
Yeah, huge.
I mean, that's incredible. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the science that you're doing on board? Because once you get the cores up, kind of like, do you do the science there, or do you take them on shore, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we do as much science as we can here. And there's some that's really important that we do on the ship, partially because we want to figure out how deep we have gone in Earth's history. So there's a number of scientists who are trying to figure out how old this rock is, because we really want to get to this period of 5 to 8 million years ago. And we don't know how old it is on the ship. We won't know if we've drilled deep enough. So we're studying tiny, tiny fossils of creatures that lived all this time ago. Since we know when they lived, we can help date these rocks. We're also looking at a number of other properties. So we have sedimentologists who are basically looking in these tubes. They're looking at the colors, the different types of minerals, and they're able to get some just like surface level, no pun intended, information about these rocks and cores so they know kind of what we're pulling up. And then we're also looking at some other basic properties that just allow us to have a basic understanding of, okay, what are we actually getting here? Are there other questions that we need to ask? Other data that we could be taking that would help us know if there's some other place that we should explore, things that are basically helping us with our like day-to-day decisions. But then this is going to inform science for more than a decade, basically.
Wow.
So all of these are going to go to a sampling party in 6 months where all these scientists get together and are able to pull the samples that they want from these cores and take them back to their home laboratories and study them and study a bunch of other things. And then they'll also go to what I would basically call a core library. It's the core repository. And scientists are going to be able to request studying these for years. So we've been taking cores for more than 50 years. I could go and ask to look at cores from 50 years ago because they're all still stored in these libraries today. So they're going to become a member of the Bremen, Germany core repository after the expedition.
Wow.
And Jonathan is here too now. Jonathan's one of our scientists for physical properties, and he's going to come join us and answer some questions as well.
Fantastic. Well, Jonathan, welcome to the show. We are excited to have you. Hopefully people will have watched the video, but just in case they didn't, could you explain again who you are and what you're doing on the ship for the research?
So my name is Jonathan Stein. I'm a postdoc at the University of Minnesota, and I work in what's called the Physical Properties Lab, which we're the first people to look at the core, and we measure the various important characteristics that are really good for correlation, and those are density, magnetics, how active it is, and how well sound can travel. And so what I do is I take the core, I put it through this core logger, this machine, and it measures all those properties for lots and lots of core. really long records that I then can analyze for correlation and figuring out changes in climate, et cetera. Yes, that's I guess quick elevator pitch.
That works.
How much is there still to learn about the ocean?
How much is there still to learn about the ocean? An extremely important question. And we have the very first guest on our Solve It for Kids podcast here to answer this question. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
It is my honor to introduce our guest back on the show, Brian Helmuth. He is a marine science professor for Northeastern University and the chief scientist of the Proteus Ocean Group.
Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is so exciting. I can't believe it's 200 episodes. Wow.
I know, right? And so for all of you listeners who maybe haven't been with us the entire journey, this was my idea way back in the pandemic. And the first person I called was Brian. And I said, Brian, I want to start a podcast. And what did he say? I'm in. Yep. Right? He said, I'm in. Let me know what I can do. And so here we are on our 200th episode. And we are so excited to have you back talking about the thing that we all love the most, the ocean.
Yeah.
So can you start kind of by reminding our listeners what you do and, what you're working on with the ocean?
Yeah, so many different things. So I'm an ocean explorer and marine biologist. So a lot of what I do is figuring out how plants and animals live as part of the ocean. But a lot of what I think about is how do humans live as part of the ocean? And how do we do that in a way that's different than we have before? I mean, how do we be part of the ocean? And thinking of it as this big, scary, unknown place.
Yes.
Okay. Can you do us a favor and say a little bit more about that? I think some of us love the ocean and it's sort of in our minds all the time. But what does it mean for humans to be a part of the ocean?
Yeah. So, anytime we walk by or drive by the ocean, we're just seeing the surface, right? We may see waves, we may see boats in the surface. A lot of what I do is diving beneath the waves and seeing what life is like underwater. And in some ways, it really is like this alien world. I mean, you're seeing animals that don't look anything like we see on land.
Yes.
Right.
So amazing and cool. And you almost can't believe that these animals exist. But by the same token, 99.9% of the living space in this planet is in the ocean, and it's part of our world, right? I mean, we're part of it, and we're impacted by it every day, whether we recognize it or not.
Yes, exactly. So one of your other titles is Aquanaut. So you spent a fair amount of time under the ocean. Yep. Can you kind of tell people what it's like to live under there?
Yeah, so we do what's called saturation diving. And what that means is you go to the bottom of the ocean with scuba gear, like we normally do with surface diving. But rather than coming back up to the surface, you come up into a space station on the seafloor that's filled with. So you're literally living on the seafloor for extended periods of time. So I've gotten to do that a couple times before for 10 days at a time. But the really cool thing is that after a couple of days down there, you feel like you're part of the ocean. I mean, you start naming all the fish around you. You almost become hostile towards the surface. You think of it as the surface being this alien world and you being part of the ocean. And so it's just one of the most amazing experiences of my life, a couple times. And I can't wait to do it again in Proteus.
Oh, that'll be fun.
That is very cool. So what I was hearing is when you're down there, all of the land dwellers are sort of like muggles.
Yes, exactly.
And I get that's why you are so passionate about sharing this.
Yeah.
You just finished that last answer with, can't wait to do it again at Proteus.
Yeah.
I mentioned you're the chief scientist for the Proteus Ocean Group.
Yep.
What is Proteus?
Yes.
Yeah. Proteus is the brainchild of explorer and aquanaut Fabien Cousteau. I worked with him at a project called Mission 31 10 years ago now, where we had a team live on the seafloor. A team that lasted for 31 days. It was in this habitat in Florida, a space station called Aquarius, that unfortunately right now is not working anymore. It got by a hurricane, but it's small and it's getting up there in years. It's 40 years old.
Right.
But Fabien got this idea, why don't we build the world's largest space station that can support people underwater, not for 10 days, not for 31 days. What if we lived there for months?
Wow.
Continuously had people living on the seafloor. I mean, what new insights and science and discovery could we do that there's just no other way we can accomplish without living on the bottom of the ocean?
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And that kind of leads into our big question, which I know is tough to answer in a 30-minute spot here. But how much is there still to learn about the ocean? I mean, we know we are sending people to space. We've had people living in space for, 20 years, but we haven't had the same thing in the ocean, have we?
No. I mean, the estimate is that we know maybe 5% of the ocean bottom.
Whoa.
I mean, it is just so unexplored. You've probably heard this before, but we really do know more about the surface of the moon than we do about large sections of the ocean. And every time I go diving, I discover something new. And I and my colleagues, my fellow marine scientists, are just constantly learning new things and surprising things that we just never knew existed before. And it really changes your view of the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you give us one example, one that comes right to the top of your mind, of how it has changed your view of the world?
So we are building Proteus in a place called Curacao. It's an island that's just to the north of Venezuela.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons we're doing it is, as you know, coral reefs have had a really tough time with climate change, especially in Florida. We had 100-degree temperatures in the waters of Florida.
Oh, wow.
Just had a really decimating effect on the corals. But in Curacao, there's still a healthy reef. So one of the really cool things that come out of the scientific community in recent years is, if your listeners know about Jacques Cousteau, and you probably talked about Jacques Cousteau.
Yes, we have.
His grandfather, he invented scuba diving. He had this famous movie called The Silent World. And it was how we dive underwater into this alien environment, and it was presented as silent. We now know it's anything but.
Yes.
There are critters down there that are constantly making noises. I mean, one of the things that I loved about living underwater is there's shrimp, these snapping shrimp that live on the habitat, and they fight. They actually warn each other by making bubbles of air that the center, this is crazy. They do what's called cavitation, where they make a bubble, and the center of the bubble is actually hotter than the surface of the sun. And as that bubble collapses, it makes this popping noise. And so if you go down underwater and you just listen, you hear snapping and popping all over the place. And it's a shrimp just communicating with each other.
Oh my gosh.
The queen, they're soldiers, they communicate. But what we found, or what my colleagues have found, is that sound really matters to the health of a reef. And there are some studies that even show that baby corals, coral larvae, can respond to the sounds of the reef. So if they hear a healthy reef, they'll preferentially swim towards it to settle. So again, something we didn't even know maybe 20 years ago that scientists are starting to uncover is there are all these amazing sounds that are constantly going on underwater.
That's incredible.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, who knew? I didn't know until a couple of years ago.
So, I mean, you've probably been hearing the sounds, but you didn't know where they were coming from or what they were doing or why they were so important.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, the snapping shrimp, and I was living underwater. I listened to it because it's nice to go to sleep to at night. But we have these little, they're called hydrophones. They record the sounds of the reef and we can leave them in place. And so after we go away, they will record the sounds of fish, and they grunt at each other. They squeak at each other. They make all these just bizarre noises that our ears may not even be able to pick up, but these hydrophones sense enough to do it.
Right.
How long can humans live underwater?
Ooh, how long can humans live underwater? You know this is gonna be so much fun. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
Our guest today is the person that has the answer to this.
Yes.
Dr. Deep Sea himself, Dr. Joe Dituri. He is a career Navy diver turned aquanaut.
Welcome to the show, Joe.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, this is gonna be fun. So fun. Now we get to talk about one of my favorite things and places, the ocean. So I like to start with, for our young listeners, did you always love the ocean?
Yeah. So what happened was I was a 10-year-old kid living on Long Island, New York. And I could always tell my time in life by the size boat that my dad had. We had boats. Like we had a 13-foot Cape Dory that we would just tow out, put in the water. And then, you know, he got a 21-foot, and then he got the 22-foot Aquasport, and then he got a 28-foot, you know, so the boat would grow in size as he could afford. But at some point, my dad got a boat that was too big to basically pull out of the water, 28 feet, and he had a little zinc tab underneath on the shaft itself. So he said, hey, Joe, there's a little wobble in the zinc shaft. Would you go underwater, hold your breath, and take the zinc tab off, and then bring it back to the surface for me? I want to look at it. And I'm like, okay. So put the mask on and go underwater. I'm like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I go back again. I'm like, I can't, Dad, I can't hold my breath. He's like, wait a minute. Don't move. He takes my Uncle John's scuba setup, double hose regulator. We are talking 70s, the late 70s. He puts this on my back, puts the double hose in my mouth, and I'm like, ooh, I can breathe. I'm standing in the mud in a canal in New York.
Oh, wow.
Then he goes, I go underwater, and he goes, wait. Don't hold your breath. That was the entirety of my scuba diving lesson. And I went underwater in a canal in New York, and I'm taking this zinc tab off, and I pull the thing off, and I'm like, there's fish down here. This is amazing. So yeah, that was the whole story. So I love the water. I love the ocean. I joined the Navy. The rest is it.
Oh my gosh. And you were 10 when this happened.
10. Yeah.
Oh
10.
my gosh. So you basically grew up as a child in the water then.
Well, first of all, we would go surfing at the beach, right? We have a break that was about 15 feet of surfing, right? And that was it. Because the break in New York is just short. And so I'd surf. I'd be at the beach every weekend. We were at the beach because that's what my mother and father did. They dug the ocean. And so you love what your parents generally love. And then from that point, you know, don't tell anybody, but I used to cut school to go diving in the canal. Tell my mom.
Okay, we promise.
Yes.
Right, zip your lips. Okay, so that really kind of ruins do you have one memory that stands out? You already had one. My hunch is you have a whole bunch more. But I do want to ask about that schooling thing, because you basically grew up with flippers on your feet, half in the water and half on land. Did you have to put in extra effort to sort of guide your schooling towards the Navy and doing underwater work, or did it just kind of happen for you?
So, truth be told, I went into the Navy not necessarily because it was my first choice. My first choice was the Marines. And my mom said, nice try again.
Yeah.
Said, but, and she said, I said, try again, get another crew. But Mom, you don't understand. Marines are cool. Navy's like wimpy. And then it was like, no. They wanted to make me a Navy nuke. And I was like, oh, okay. I had a good enough grade on the SFAB. So, but I did not do well in high school. And unfortunately, I didn't pay very much attention. It just wasn't my jam. Right. I didn't have a lot of college options, if you will, like for an ROTC scholarship. And they were like, no, you're not that guy. And my best choice at that time was to join the Navy. And so I gave that the option. I went to nuke school and then, life is history from there. But yeah, as the aquatic life developed, I kind of sort of fell into the Navy because it made sense, right?
Wow.
You're in the Navy,
right.
Yeah.
Water things, it's all good, right? And then, being smart enough to get there. And then what happened, I wrecked a motorcycle on the East-West Expressway on I-4, coming off of I-4.
Oh, wow.
And they found out I was a nuke and I had this eczema on my hands. So what failed, basically make me become a nuke, was the fact that I wasn't medically qualified, but they gave my choice of any school in the Navy. So I went a whole different routes and a whole bunch of enlisted things that it's crazy. And then I finally became a diver at a dive place. And, the rest is history from there.
That's fantastic. So tell us about your life as a diver. Like, how did that start? And, kind of like, how deep do you go? And what do you find when you dive?
Right. So I did a whole bunch of things. So while I was in the Navy, I became a Navy diver. I worked at a saturation diving facility, and then I got commissioned and I became a special operations officer, and I did all kinds of diving on that. Well, I continued my civilian side of the house for diving as well. And it was just a zest for life, right? I just wanted to do this deep exploration type diving. The deeper I went, the better it was. I like to live a little bit on the edge, the adrenaline drunk.
Yes.
Right. So then I started becoming smarter and smarter and smarter. And then I'm using these recirculating devices. And then before I know it, I'm at the Working Divers Conference. There's a crowd of master divers around me going, wait a minute, tell me how that works again. And I'm like, okay, physiology.
Wow.
And they're like, no way, really? And I'm like, yeah, that's the way physiology works. And they're like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, well, because last weekend I did a 300-foot dive off. They're like, you did not. All the time. They're like, hold on, how do you get there? And before you know it, I brought the civilian stuff to the Navy, but my Navy also compounded me being a saturation diver.
So as a Navy diver, was it salvage operations? What were you doing as a Navy diver?
Sure. I did a whole bunch of salvage operations. I was the salvage officer and operations officer on a salvage ship. I worked with diving salvage unit 1. I did a lot of like towing, beach, legs of beach gear, pulling ships off the beach, that kind of thing.
Wow.
Deep water recovery. Good stuff. Good, solid Navy diving. Booyah, right? And then one of my stuff was the boring ship's husbandry. But it keeps our fleet and forces running, right? It's the underwater work that prevents you from having to put the ship in a dry dock. So you can just work it underwater and it makes it cheaper.
Exactly. So we want to get to our question too, which is how long can humans live underwater? So tell us about your amazing 100 days underwater.
So human tolerance right now has been extended from 73 days to 100 days. We just did that. And it's because we had a purpose in mind. And everybody says, why did you do it for 100 days? And I said, because I can't afford 200 days. Wait. So why 200 days, guys? 200 days is the length of time that it's going to take us to get to Mars. And Elon keeps saying, we're going to Mars. And I'm like, Elon, I have a question. What are we going to eat? We'll work that out. What, Elon, what are we going to drink?
Yes.
Who's going to carry us off? Because every single astronaut that comes off the International Space Station needs to be carried off.
Yes.
after 200 days. What are we going to do to stop muscle loss, stop bone degradation? We need to build osteoblasts to build bone. These are real science problems that this generation, that this group of kids has to start looking at, because if we're going to Mars, boy, we need to solve some problems, and somebody better get working on it. And I have my things I'm working on, but there's other things that need to be worked on.
Yes, this is fantastic.
What an awesome best of episode. No matter what you're doing this summer, you probably now want to go to the ocean. Whether it's doing science at sea, figuring out whether or not you can live beneath the ocean, or just learning more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope you enjoyed this. And if you want to leave a comment or tell us what you enjoyed or how you are going to get to the ocean anytime soon, you can tag us on our social media. We are at KidSolve at Facebook, X, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out our website, solveitforkids.com, where we'll have all of these episodes and also some fun facts about the hosts. So check it out.
Until next week, Jen and Jeff will still be on break one more time. You'll hear us on Solve It for Kids.